Hello, and welcome back to another episode of More Than Milestones. I'm here today with Rachel from Hey Sleepy Baby, and I am so excited to talk about all things sleep because, as you probably know, as you definitely know, it is a controversial topic. And I, in the past, have shared about my choices, but I'm just excited to bring this episode to anybody that needs to hear it. So, Rachel, thank you so much for being here with us. And can you just
Thank you
tell
so
us
much for
first
having
a
me.
little bit? Of course. And tell us a little bit like where, if people don't know you, where can they find you? Give us your info.
Yeah, so hi, my friend. I'm Rachel, and I founded Hey Sleepy Baby back in 2020 when I was freshly postpartum with my second baby. I now have three, which is crazy. They're 8, 5.5, and almost 3. And I live in San Francisco. And yeah, I founded Hey Sleepy Baby back then, really just kind of looking for an alternative to traditional sleep training methods. Just really didn't work for me with my first. I was like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be people that are opting out of this or that are doing it differently. Like, what can I find? And I really just kind of set out to make resources and content that I would have loved to see as a new mom.
Yeah, I love that. And we will link your resources in the episode notes for anybody that is looking for them or looking for that support. But I think one of the first things that drew me the most to you was your story about sleep training your first or trying to sleep train your oldest. Do you want
Hmm.
I would love for you to like just touch on that piece a little bit because I think it's so important for people to see that like it doesn't have to be you sleep train or you don't and we're pinned against each other. It can be like I tried and it wasn't great and here's what I learned, but obviously that has shaped so much of everything you do now. So I would love to hear that from you.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, so like I said, my oldest is just about 8. And so Instagram was a totally different place back then. Like it wasn't a parenting forward. I mean, it just was so different. It was not in any way, shape, or form what it looks like today. So the parenting content you were getting was like blogs or advice from your pediatrician or from your mom friends or your parents or whatever. And so really the only message that I was getting when I first became a mom was A, that there was something wrong with my baby, that he was still waking up at night, and B, that there was something that I needed to do to fix that. And I guess C, the only way to do that was through some sort of cry it out or Ferber style sleep training method. And so yeah, we tried it. We did it when he was really little. He was 4 months old and I was panicking because I was about to go back to work. I used to be a teacher. I was a special education teacher for about a decade before I did this. And so I was like, we've got to teach him to sleep in the crib. He's got to be able to be put down for naps. Like, how is he going to hang at daycare? How is anybody else going to put him to sleep if I'm not there to breastfeed him? So there were all of these outside pressures, and I was so scared about what it was going to be like. And so, yeah, so I think that is a huge part of why I do what I do now because I fell victim to all of this like really fear-based messaging that you get from sleep trainers. They're never going to sleep again. They're never going to be independent. They're never going to get out of your bed. You're going to have to hold them forever. No one's going to be able to put them to sleep. Your marriage is going to be ruined. Like all of these things that you hear, I fell victim to all of those things. And so I was like, well, I guess we got to do this. And, you also hear all of those success stories. You see these programs that have a 98% success rate, or that, they say, yeah, it's a couple tough nights of crying, but then you have a great sleeper for life. There's all these crazy promises. And so we kind of got to the point too where we felt like we had to do this, for our baby's brain development and for our relationship and for him to get healthy sleep. And they make you all these huge promises and they say that it's going to be, maybe a little bit hard at first, but then it's all these great sleep habits and healthy sleep for life. So it feels
Yeah.
worth it. And it didn't work. And we tried it again a few months later and it didn't work. And we tried it again a few months later and it didn't work. So finally we just said, F this. I'll get up with him a couple times in the night if that's what we need to do. It's not a big deal. Let's just forget this. And then he started sleeping through the night by himself, like a few months later. And we had changed nothing. Just overnight, weaned himself, started sleeping through, and that was that. And
Yeah.
he still is an amazing sleeper. He sleeps like 11, 12 hours a night. Not to trigger you. I know your kids are low sleep needs, but he still he still is an amazing sleeper. So it's like, okay, well, so clearly there was something that we were missing or that was missing from the conversation then, because there are other ways. They will learn to sleep. It's not all it's cracked up to be. So yeah, that's kind of the short version.
Yeah, totally. And I honestly, I had a similar experience with my oldest. Definitely felt that external pressure and had to navigate that and really lean into like what worked for me and for her. It was really sleep was one of the biggest components of my like need to control with postpartum anxiety and her sleep. Like I could not, she never fit in the wake windows. She never fit in like
Mm-hmm.
what they said she should be doing. I would literally, which this feels like such crazy behavior, but like in retrospect, but I would like leave. I was on the road with patients. She was at daycare. She would not go down for anybody else. And I did not want them to like make her cry or let her cry just because that's my preference. And that's the other thing. If you're listening to this episode, I just want to say this one piece. Like, if you chose to sleep train and it is working for you, like, please don't take anything that we're saying as like, judgment or whatever. Everybody's
No,
situation is so different. I just feel like it's really important to hear the other side of it because the sleep train inundation for me at that stage, that really like sensitive stage of motherhood for me was so bad. It was so bad for me.
same.
And I just wish that I had heard that there was another option that people were doing or had, like anyway. So whether you sleep train or not, I just hope you can hear this episode from like our experiences and our truth. But it's never with any judgment on you. But yeah, I would literally, I was on the road with my patients in early intervention. I would schedule my day so I could have a break in my treatment, go to daycare, pick her up and drive her around for a little bit so she would sleep and then I
Yeah.
would bring her back. Like that is wild behavior. And I think one of the first things that I would love for us to like dig into is kind of just understanding biological norms because I feel like that is
Yeah.
not a big part of the conversation. And for me, like realizing, I don't know who it was that said it, but like it was such a click moment for me. Someone was like, everyone wakes up at night. Like no one sleeps through the night. Everyone is going to get up and move. Maybe for an adult, you need a little bit of water or you need to adjust your sheets or kick your socks off. It's what you need to fall back asleep or what a child needs to fall back asleep. But like it is normal to wake up at night and tell us about the sleep norms. Like what does sleeping through the night really mean? Can I pass the mic to you for that?
So, yes, you sure can. This is one of my favorite topics to nerd out on. And yeah, you're right. So, none of us sleep through the night. Everybody wakes up between sleep cycles. So, adults have sleep cycles that are, around 90 minutes or so. For infants, they're shorter. So, they're, maybe 50, 60 minutes or so. So, if you have a baby that's waking up every sleep cycle, yeah, it's exhausting, but it's not necessarily that there is something wrong. And I can go into red flags and stuff like that later on as like if parents are wondering, okay, but this doesn't actually feel great. When is it not normal? But yeah, we all wake up. We just don't know it. We subconsciously, kind of in our sleep, in between these sleep cycles, we check our surroundings basically, right? Like we're making sure we're still safe. Babies are making sure they're still breathing. Like it's very, very necessary for us as humans to not just be completely dead to the world for 12 hours overnight, right? That would leave us in a very vulnerable position if you think about it from like an evolutionary standpoint. So yeah, so we
Mhm.
kind of wake briefly, we fall right back into the next sleep cycle because we are adults and we know we're safe, we're okay. It's fine to fall back asleep. And we don't even usually clock those wakings unless, like you said, we're getting up to get some water, go to the bathroom, reach out and cuddle our partner, whatever it is. Babies can't do that. They can't regulate themselves, right? So if they have a need, they need to cry out for their adult to help them. And so that's what that is. It's also really interesting because you see all this pressure for, 12 hours of sleep overnight or consolidated sleep or sleeping through the night. This feels like a really big milestone for parents. And actually, if you look at kind of like the history of human sleep and just the biology of it, like you were saying, biological norms, there's actually some evidence to say that we as humans had biphasic sleep. So kind of like two sleeps, and they were broken up by like a longer wake period. So there's some evidence that humans would, and this was up till like industrialized times, by the way. This is not that long ago, maybe a few hundred years ago at most. But we would, have our first sleep of a few hour chunk. We'd wake up in the middle of the night. We would hang out, chat, get something to eat, and then we would go back to sleep for the second phase. So just all
Really?
of this stuff. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And babies,
Wow.
they don't know that they're being born into modern times. They are, their sleep and their biology is still ancient. So I think that is such a huge piece. Like you said, it was a huge light bulb for you. And I think for so many other parents too, to just realize like your baby is not broken because they are waking up at night. They're supposed to wake up, especially in those first few months when they're waking up to feed. That's their job. They're waking up to grow. They're waking up to, if you're breastfeeding, keep up your milk supply. They're waking up to keep themselves safe from, SIDS. We don't want babies that just conk out and sleep deeply all the way through. I know that that sounds like the goal, but waking is protective for them. So I think just that mindset shift is really, really kind of the first key to getting into this phase where we're just kind of accepting.
Yeah, because sleeping through the night is really, it's what, 5 hours is the actual definition?
Yeah. So this is another really interesting piece is that parents always assume sleeping through the night means 7 to 7, right? That like mystical schedule that every parent, at least in the US, other parents, other places do not think this way. But we see it as like the gold standard, right? Like you put your baby down at 7, they sleep through the night. That means till 7 the next day. But actually, if you look at sleep research, infant sleep research, it's usually defined as a 5 or 6 hour stretch. There's a couple of papers where they define it as 8 hours. But absolutely nowhere in the research do they define sleeping through the night as 12 hours. So that is not only unnecessary, but it's unsubstantiated by any research that it is, what babies need or what most babies will do.
And so I feel like a big important piece of this to like reflect on as well is like with our oldest, I was a full-time outside of the house working parent at that point, right? Like I also would call myself low sleep needs. So it was never a huge deal for me to be awake or waking up. But I feel like that is a big piece of the sleep training conversation is parents who are going back to a 9 to 5, like they do need their baby to be sleeping. They do. If you're higher sleep needs, you do need your baby to sleep. So I feel like where do you, and I know a lot of your methods are in supporting, not necessarily, or not crying it out, not a variation of that, but giving parents the tools to still create a good sleeper or a good sleep environment based on biological norms. So I would love for you to just like touch on that a little bit because I think that's such a big piece of the conversation.
Totally. Oh my God, it's a huge piece. I mean, it's why sleep training has thrived in our society and not elsewhere, right? Like what's the common denominator or what's the difference there, I should say, is that we don't have maternity leave and other countries do have maternity leave. So
Yeah.
and like I said at the beginning, that was a huge driving force for why I felt so pressured to sleep train because I was a teacher. I was having to be at work by 7 a.m. I really needed sleep. I consider myself more of like a high sleep needs person. So I totally get it. And it's also why I do so much advocacy and why I never shut up about the problems that we need to fix in our society because it's really doing
Yeah.
moms and babies and dads and whoever caregivers such a disservice. And it's also so important for you listening to just understand that this is so hard because the system is stacked against you and you're not supposed to be doing this alone. You're not supposed to be doing this without support. We were evolved. We are supposed to be in groups. If you look at like hunter-gatherer groups, baby sleeps very close to mom, but then throughout the day, there's so much support. There's other people to hold the baby. There's other people even to feed the baby. And we were never meant to be in these very isolated nuclear families where it's all on one parent or all on even two parents. It's more work than even two parents should have to do by themselves. So that's why it feels so hard because we don't have these bigger systems to support us, like maternity leave, like quality childcare, all of those things. But to go back to your kind of original question, there also are a lot of things in between. So for those parents, and I always poll my community because I always just want to kind of know where people are at. And every time I poll, it's pretty much split 50-50. So there are, maybe 50% of parents who are on maternity leave currently or working part-time or have flexible schedules. And then the other half are fully working parents, right? So we do have a lot of different perspectives across the board in my community. But one thing that I do hear again and again is that it's still not necessary to sleep train if that's not something you want to do if you're working, because there are those other options. So there's co-sleeping, there's bed sharing, there's using a floor bed, there's taking shifts with your partner. There's all these different things that you can try to just get better sleep. Again, we don't need to look at these unrealistic goals of your baby sleeping 12 hours, but how can you get good enough sleep for this short phase in life right now so that you can still function and do all of the things that you need and want to do?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I feel like that hopefully that's encouraging for people that are navigating it. Because I think a big piece of the conversation as well is how to navigate really like whether sleep training is right for your family or not and your child based on temperament. And I know you talk a lot about temperament, and I feel like it matters. My kids are all very different
Mhm.
individuals, and they all have very different sleep now that they're a little bit older, and like I feel like they've found kind of their rhythm. But with my oldest being highly
Yeah.
sensitive, like it wasn't happening for whatever the reason might
Mhm.
be. So maybe we can just touch on going back to that piece about a child's ability to self-soothe realistically, but also how that temperament ties into what your decision is regarding sleep.
Yes. So the first piece I'll touch on, and then I will come back to temperament. But the first piece I'll touch on, since you mentioned self-soothing, because this is another one of those huge myths in the baby sleep world. So there are babies that are able to self-soothe, and there are other babies that are not as readily able or available to self-soothe. And that partially comes down to, like you mentioned, their temperament. And a lot of sleep training rhetoric and a lot of the things you'll see say, you have to teach your baby to self-soothe. You have to leave them to cry. You have to just put them down, all of this stuff to teach them to self-soothe. Really, what the story behind self-soothing is that there was a researcher named Thomas Anders, and he had a team of researchers, and they were looking at baby sleep back in like the 70s. And they were observing babies' sleep habits overnight, essentially. And what they noticed was that there was one group of babies who would, what they called self-soothe, meaning that they would wake. Remember, we talked about how everybody wakes between their sleep cycles, right? And these babies that were able to self-soothe were the ones that were more likely to kind of just fall back asleep, just into their next sleep cycle, without outside support. And so they started calling those babies soothers. And then there was another group of babies who would wake and they would signal. So they would cry out or vocalize or something to get their parent response. And they called them the signalers. So this term self-soothing basically came out of that study. Thomas Anders himself said, actually, you can't teach a baby to self-soothe. That's not at all what we were doing. That's not at all what we saw. There was no teaching of the baby to self-soothe, especially not by leaving them to cry. Because as we know, like in education and with anything else, you're not going to teach anyone anything by flooding them, flooding their nervous system. But he was like, this was just a thing that we saw, that we noticed that there were kind of these two camps of babies. And one explanation for that, as you mentioned, is temperament. And I talk all about temperament on my page. I don't know when this episode's going live, but I'm doing a live temperament workshop, which is always super, super popular at the end of October. But it's so, so important for parents to understand that you can't compare even your own kids, right? You said your own kids have all different temperaments, and my 3 kids have different temperaments too. What works for one won't work for the other. And I think a lot of the stress and pressure in those postpartum months comes from comparing. And not only do we now have to compare our kids to our friends' kids, but we also have to compare our kids to all the kids we see on social media, which can be in some ways a good thing. Like, it can bond us and help us and make us realize we're not alone, right? So social media can be so beautiful, but then there's also this other side to it where we're comparing. And we're looking at a baby who might have a really easy temperament, and sleep training went really well for them because they're just a chill baby who would kind of fall into whatever schedule. And, they might fuss for a few minutes and then they fall asleep, no problem. So the parent thinks it's no big deal. And then you're looking at it as a parent of a highly sensitive child who would go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds and scream and cry until they throw up. And you're like,
Mhm.
there's just no way that you two parents are going to have the same experience with sleep training. And that's because of your baby's temperament. It's not because one parent is a better mom or one parent found this one secret method or purchased the right class or read the right book. It's the temperament. It's everything.
Yeah, it's so true. And honestly, like I truly thought that I was doing something wrong because for one, so many of my friends had babies around the same time. There were so many things that now in hindsight, again, I realize were related to temperament and personality. And like, I was like, why am I not natural at this? Why can't I soothe my baby as easily as everyone else seems to? It was really hard for me I wouldn't even say that I was able to get out of it. I feel like I was really in my head about it. And the really interesting thing for me was when I started being honest about our sleep setup and my experience with my kids' sleep on social media after Liv was born, so many people were like, I would lie. I would be like, oh yeah, my kid sleeps through the night, because everybody wants to know, how are they sleeping? That's like the first question you get. And
Yep.
realizing how many people were lying because they were like, either you don't want to deal with the conversation or you feel ashamed that it's your baby's not, or whatever might be going on. That was so eye-opening for me. But a lot of people don't get that perspective because it's hard to be open about it and feel like you're going to get judged, or like people are looking at you like you're going to ruin your kid if they're not sleeping whatever they think they should be. Hey friends, Casey here. If you've ever listened to an episode and thought, I wish she'd go even deeper, or I wonder what she really thinks about that, I am so excited to share More Than Milestones Unfiltered, where I do exactly that. More Than Milestones Unfiltered is my private Substack community where I share 2 exclusive podcast episodes every single month. 2 episodes that will never make it to Instagram or the public feed. These are the even more raw, unfiltered stories, harder conversations, and the that's a story for another day moments I usually hold back on. If you want to join me there, just head to the show notes or my link in bio and subscribe. I'd love to see you inside. Okay, let's go back to attachment a little bit, because I know again, this is a big conversation, but I think a big part of where the division comes from with sleep training versus not is related to attachment, and is it damaging, is it not? And I think that's really hard for parents to navigate. So I would love to just kind of hear your thoughts on sleep training or not sleep training, and just general attachment, if you have any
Yeah.
research, anything like that.
Of course. Yeah, this is a huge topic. I did an episode on my podcast, No One Told Us, with Tracy Cassells. She's a PhD and she does so much research on sleep training. And we had a conversation about this. So if anybody wants, a full hour of us gabbing about this and
Yes.
about like the high sensitivity piece and all of that, that's a great episode for people to do like a deep dive. But yeah, I mean, I understand why this is such a huge worry. Like, we all want our kids to be securely attached and, to have a great relationship with them. And I think it's complicated and there's no one right answer. I don't believe in fear-mongering parents. So I would never say sleep training is going to cause attachment issues. I would never, ever say that. A, because I don't want to freak parents out, and B, because we have no evidence of that. So there's no evidence that shows sleep training harms attachment. A lot of people will look to this one study that was, they call it a longitudinal study, but they did a follow-up at like 6 years old. So how long? Anyway, that's a whole other rant. But so they looked at the effects of sleep training on a bunch of kids. And the study is really not very well done. There's a lot of issues with methodology that they used. A lot of people actually dropped out of the study. But a lot of people cling on to this one piece where they measured attachment, and they showed that basically there was no change. So there was no effect on attachment, good or bad, for the kids who were sleep trained versus the kids who were not sleep trained. Again, the measure that they used to assess the attachment was parent report. So basically saying, do you feel like your kid is attached to you? It was a little more complicated than that, but like not the most scientifically robust measure, right? So a lot of people that are pro sleep training will pull from that and say, look, there's no effect on attachment. What I prefer to say is, we don't know. We don't have enough information. We likely never will have enough information on this, because it would be unethical to conduct a study where we make some kids do cry it out and other kids not. So we're never going to have that. And that's okay. And I would rather us look kind of more within and just have a little more critical thinking and a little more self-reflection than just a knee-jerk, oh, this study says it doesn't harm attachment, so it must not harm attachment. Now, if we look at other cultures where there is no sleep training and everybody co-sleeps, it's not like 100% of those kids are securely attached either, right? So there's more to it, is basically the bottom line. Attachment is so dynamic. There are so many different pieces and facets that go into what forms a secure attachment. And choosing to sleep train or not, or choosing to bed share or not, or choosing to breastfeed or not, or all of these other parenting choices that we make, it's very unlikely, aside from abuse, aside from abusive things, it's very unlikely that one choice like that is going to make or break your child's attachment, because attachment is made through thousands and thousands of interactions. I will say that, in my opinion, sleep training can kind of set the stage for non-responsiveness. So, we know from research that most of the time sleep training is not just that 2 or 3 days. It's usually having to be redone many times, like when the kid gets sick, when you travel, teething, like all these things come up, sleep regressions. And so if you are setting up that that pattern of child cries out, I ignore, or child cries out and I delay response, or, things like that, then, that's not an amazing pattern for us to get into, because we do know that attachment is supported by sensitive and predictable responses from parent to
Mm,
child. I think also the question we need to be asking more so, that not a lot of work has been done in the past, but it's starting to become more of a thing in the last decade or so, is what is this doing to the child's stress response? So, what is actually happening in their brain? And to me, that's kind of where we should be leading the conversation going
yeah.
forward. Because again, attachment is so dynamic, but there is a real risk of the child being really overflooded with stress, which can not always, but can be kind of stored in the body, as a trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you said about sleep regressions, because I feel like that's
Hmm.
something that I definitely didn't understand as a first-time parent, or really even
Yeah.
like a second-time parent. And in hindsight, knowing that those things are fairly predictable, and that like flipping the switch to look at them more as like something really cool is probably on the other side. Like there's
Yeah.
something happening, a milestone that's about to emerge. I feel like that was one thing I didn't know about sleep training, was that it was going to have to be done more than once. Like I really, when I tried with my oldest, I was like, okay, we just like 3 bad nights and we're going to be good to go. And, you know, that was not, I mean, we didn't even make it to night 3, but had we, like, I feel like that's an important thing to understand too, just in terms of norms and
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah. What's really interesting too is we have two close friends that have sleep trained their kids as infants, and they're all going through it right now with their toddlers. Like it's not a guarantee. And look, if you need to do it to get through whatever you're going through and you just need sleep and this is just what you've decided you have to do, that's one thing. But I care about parents doing it because they think their kid will never sleep otherwise, or, because they think they're giving their child, this is the one that drives me nuts. They're giving their child the gift of sleep. No. It doesn't last. The effects are very short-lived, even in papers that you look at that are, pro sleep training and say, yeah, this works. This is a good intervention. It's safe. It's effective. You see the increase of sleep is like 20 minutes a night, if that.
What? Really?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. The kid isn't sleeping
Wow.
more. They're just not signaling to you. So the parents are sleeping more,
Okay,
but the
can we
baby's
talk
not
about
getting
that?
any
Because
more
that's
sleep.
what? Really?
Yeah, the baby's not getting significantly more sleep after sleep training in general. Are there babies that do? Like, sure. So don't at me if your baby's really sleeping more. Research doesn't care about like one person's experience. It cares about the trends, right? And what happens to the group overall. And what we see is that, there's one study where I think it was like 16 minutes more a night. There was another that was like 8. It's not significantly improving baby sleep because, again, babies wake up. They're supposed to wake up. It's just a matter of
Right.
whether they're signaling to you or not. So the parents wake up and report better sleep. And that's why these studies will say that it improved sleep, it improved mental health, all of that stuff. Because, yeah, the parents are getting more sleep, but the baby is not. So,
Wow. I don't think I ever realized that. That's very interesting. Wow. So let's go back to the red flags,
yes.
because I I I think that's important to add on to the expectations, or normal sleep, quote unquote, understanding when it might not be so normal, whether you're sleep
Yeah.
training or not.
Yeah. Red flags are something that I am so, so passionate about talking about because not a lot of parents realize that there are many reasons that a baby could be waking up that are outside of the norm. And what I usually like to say, because again, I don't want to scare parents. So, what I usually like to say is it's not necessarily the waking up that's the problem, right? It's how are those wakings presenting? So, is your baby waking up screaming? Are they waking up really distressed or they seem super uncomfortable? Are they waking up constantly, like every 45 minutes? Are they waking up and staying awake for a really long time? And then also, are there other symptoms? So things like, if your baby was described as colicky when they were an infant, is there something going on there? Is there some sort of allergy or intolerance where they really are uncomfortable? Is there, tongue tie issues like that where it's contributing to feeding or to sleep? Is there an airway issue? So is your baby sleeping with an open mouth? Do they snore? Do they choke or gasp or kind of pause in breathing while they're asleep? Apnea, like things like that. So there are so many different things that could be going on that is actually causing more waking than is necessary or more distressed waking. So I
Mm.
always tell parents to just like take note and just be really curious and kind of just see if you notice any of those things. And if you do, take videos. So if you notice your baby is like kind of making these weird sounds or they're gasping in their sleep or they're snoring, take a video, record it, share it with your doctor, and see if you can get a referral to a specialist. Because I can't tell you how many times I hear from parents saying, my baby woke up every hour for an entire year. We finally got them tested for, their ferritin, their iron stores, and they were like off the charts low. We started supplementing and they're like a different kid. They're sleeping through the night. Or, oh my gosh, my baby was snoring. I thought it was just something that all babies did. Took them to an ENT. Turns out they have like a 90% blockage and they get their
Mm.
adenoids removed and they're sleeping through the night. So, again, like sleep training, we can't look at it as this just one size fits all solution, because if you sleep train a baby like that, yeah, maybe they'll stop waking up, right? They'll stop waking you up, I should say. They'll stop signaling, but that underlying health issue that they might have is not going away. So
Yeah.
it's really, really important for us to kind of explore those things before making a decision like that.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about one, I would love to talk about kind of navigating the judgment that can come with choosing not
Mhm.
to sleep train if you're going to
Mhm.
share that. And two, kind of just in general, navigating whether sleep training is right for you. Because I think I knew in my gut that it didn't feel great, but I really felt like I had hurting her by not, because she
Yeah.
wasn't sleeping. So I think that might be a helpful kind of like tie this all together for parents. Yeah. So in terms of the judgment, because obviously there's judgment on both sides, right? Like some
Mhm.
people who choose not to sleep train are very judgmental of people who did, and vice versa. And I think unless you're in it and living it, maybe it's hard to see both sides of that. So do you
Mhm.
have any tips or things to consider for kind of navigating that judgment or
Yeah.
conversation?
It's so hard. And like I said, like I have close friends who have sleep trained. I sleep trained myself. There is absolutely zero judgment. All I care about is giving parents the information they need to feel like they're making an informed choice. So, as far as the judgment, I mean, I think what I always say is like nobody's opinion matters except for the ones who are doing the waking up. So, if you
Mhm.
are on board, if your partner is on board, and you guys agree and you feel good about your choices, that's really all that matters, right? As long as you're not hurting your baby, like go for it. But that's a lot easier said than done because, like you said, there is so much judgment that comes from both sides. I know a lot of people feel very judged or, kind of like made fun of by family and things like that, or people are just not really supportive. I hear all the time people tell me, like, yeah, my friend told me she won't listen to me anymore because I won't sleep train. So I'm not allowed to complain about being tired or, things like that that are just really, really hurtful. So
Mhm.
I think part of it is knowing your audience, right? So, like you said, so many of us lie because we
Mhm.
just don't want to hear it. So, like, if you're talking to your grandmother or, your pediatrician or your mother in law or somebody who, you're not really interested in getting a lecture from, just, you know, say, yeah, they're sleeping like a baby, or yeah, they're sleeping great, or yeah, we're getting enough sleep. Just keep it super brief. The other thing that always worked for me was just being overly positive. So I co-slept with both of my girls, and of course sometimes you'd get judgment from people or like snide little comments, and so I would just be overly positive in an annoying, sickening way where I'd say, "Oh my god, I love it. I hope she sleeps with me till she's in college. It is just the best. It's so sweet. It's my favorite thing ever." And that tends to shut people up really quick. So
Yeah.
you could try that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard. It's just knowing your audience. Some people I just won't talk to about it at all. So I have a friend who's sleep trained and they were kind of hardcore about it. I didn't want to hear about it. They know how I feel about it, right? Like they are not stupid. They've been friends with us forever. So it's just a topic that we really don't bring up. And that's okay. We can talk about other things. And, I'm not going to stop being friends with them. They're not going to stop being friends with me just because we have different approaches to how we do sleep. I know she's a good mom. She knows I'm a good mom. And some things you just don't need to talk about. If you feel like you're being disrespected, though, or if you feel like you're being judged or you're being put down, then you might need to set a boundary and say, I'm not willing to talk about this and we need to talk about other things, or like, I'm not going to be able to continue with this. So I think
Yeah.
that's also very much easier said than done. But sometimes people really do need that hard boundary.
Yeah. And, when for me, really leaning into, there was a long period where I just didn't talk about it anymore. Like, I was like,
Hmm.
literally, I don't want the input from all sides, like,
Yeah.
whatever. But what you said is something that really helped me years ago feel more confident in sharing and more confident in my decisions, was literally being like, you know what, honestly, if you're not waking up with my kids at night, if you're not managing my kids at night, if I'm not leaving them with you during the day when
Hmm.
they should be napping and they're distraught or whatever the case might be, it is literally none of your business. Like truly none of your business. And that was hard for me to wrap my head around, but it was so life-giving in learning to like stand in so many of my decisions as a parent, not even
Mm.
just sleep training. So I love that piece. Okay, for people that are on the fence, that are like, I truly don't know. I don't know whether I should sleep train. I don't know if I should not. Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. I mean, I think this sounds so corny, but like leaning into your intuition and tuning into your gut, I think is a really good first step. So if your gut is saying, I really don't want to sleep train, like I really don't want to do this, the next thing you would say is, okay, but am I coping right now? Is what we're doing working right now? That I think is the biggest thing and the most important place to start, because so many parents are choosing something because they're afraid of what's going to happen in the future. And if there's one thing we know about babies and toddlers is that they are changing constantly. They're growing and changing all the time. Everything is a phase. So if you are saying, I really don't want to sleep train, I'm actually like doing fine with co-sleeping right now, or I'm doing fine with laying with my toddler right now. I don't really mind rocking them to sleep, or, whatever it is. Great. Just keep doing what is working for you, right? Because it's going to change sooner than you think, regardless, even if you do nothing,
Mhm.
right? Because our kids are so quickly and rapidly developing. And if the answer to that is actually no, I'm not coping well, I'm really not doing well, I'm exhausted, I'm resentful, I'm grouchy, I'm not being the mom I want to be, then let's look at what kinds of support you can get, right? Are you running on empty? Are you doing everything yourself? Are there things that you can outsource in your life? Are there routines that you can maybe switch up? Are creative solutions you and your partner can work out together? So, what support can you bring on? And then I would say the next piece is, okay, do we need to actually make a change to my child? Right? So, thinking about ourselves first, how can we support ourselves because we're the adults? And then if we do need to make a change with our child, that's also completely fine. And there are definitely ways that you can encourage better sleep without moving on to a sleep training method if that's not something you want to do. I actually have a free guide I can send you guys to put in the show notes that's called 8 Ways to Get Better Sleep Without Sleep Training. And it's all about just
Love
like
it.
making these natural changes. So, thinking about your baby's sleep pressure and thinking about their naps and how all of that can impact nights, and, thinking about their sleep location. Maybe they're, lots of times moms are up and down a million times a night because they're trying to get their baby to sleep in the crib. They're just trying to make the crib happen. And I'm like, switch to a floor bed, please. I'm begging you, just try
Mhm.
it. Or,
Mhm.
would you consider co-sleeping? Like, is that something that you would maybe be open to right now at this moment? Or, there are other things that you can try as well. But yeah, I think that's a really good place to start, is that freebie of just kind of ticking through, making sure there are no red flags, nothing going on with your baby medically that's causing them to be more wakeful than is necessary, and all of that stuff that we've kind of been talking about.
Yeah. And we'll definitely put that in the show notes. And I kind of, just to like round this out, I think that something you just said is so important. And it's really hard in the moment to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
But I think a part of the conversation that is puts that pressure on a timeline is like, I really genuinely believe that I only had until like 6 months. And then if I didn't sleep train by the time, she hit that 6-month mark, or she was starting to crawl or starting to become more mobile, that like I was toast. And I think what you said is really
Yeah.
important, because it's a hard season, but it is still a season and it is going to get better. And you don't have to do it right that second. Like, there are still things you can change for a toddler, for a bigger kid, like
Mhm.
I think if parents can, like, hear that hopeful part that, like, it feels really hard because it is really hard, and it's going to get easier whether you intervene
Whether you do
or
something or
whether
not.
you write it.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a big piece.
And I think also just knowing that sleep training isn't always a magic bullet. So, if it's something that really doesn't feel good to you, but you feel like you have to do it because it's like you're making this investment or something in the long term, it's like, I can't even tell you, Casey, probably 85 to 90% of the clients that we get have tried sleep training, have done it, and they're coming to us because it either stopped working or didn't work in the first place. So I would also just offer that where it's like, don't get sucked into thinking there's one super easy way to do it that like you're just missing out on and that everybody else knows that there's this one secret or there's this one method, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's more complicated than that. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is okay, I feel like this could be like a 10-part episode because there's so much to it, but
Tell me
I
about it.
I feel like this is a good spot to pause and just
Hmm.
give people that encouragement that, like, again, it feels hard because it is hard, but it is gonna get better, and sleep training, if you
Hmm.
choose to, great. If it works for you, great, but it's not your only option. That is what I hope people can take from this episode is, like, understanding those biological norms and those expectations, and that there are so many things that you can do or implement, and, it really is gonna get better. So can you
Yeah.
just tell us one more time where they can find you? We'll put all those
Yes.
links, that podcast and everything in the episode notes, but tell us one more time where people can find you.
Yes, definitely. And I think one thing too about like the judgment piece and the anxiety piece, and just also keeping in mind, yes, it will end. I think community is one thing that can really, really help with all of those things, right? So I remember when I was a new mom, I used to love following or talking to moms who have kind of been through that baby stage before, to just reassure me, like, you're not going to be in this forever. I promise. I know you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel right now, but it's coming. You're not going to be sleep deprived forever. So if you want a community like that, where, we're not sleep training, but we value sleep, like all of us want to sleep, right?
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
I love sleep. You can come to my Instagram, which is Hey Sleepy Baby, and then I've got a lot of blog posts, freebies, all of that kind of stuff on my website, heysleepybaby.com. So all the stuff that we were kind of talking about, like the red flags, temperament, all of those types of things, I have a bunch of blog posts on if people want to peruse.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and again, we
Thank
will link
you.
all of that stuff in the notes, and thank you for being here. I so appreciate it, and I so
Thank
appreciate
you for
your
having
work
me.
and all of your efforts and everything.
Thank you so much. Back
Okay.
at you.
Okay, so that is all for this episode of More Than Milestones,
Perfect.
and we will see you next time.